Hey there, welcome back to another new design walkthrough here. So this Photoshop template is called Hydro. And so we're going to jump into the layer stack here and look at the options so that you know how to easily customize this thing when you drop your subjects in. Alright, so starting at the top, as usual, is our color grading layers. So you can see that's going to do quite a bit of additional contrast and some color addition here to kind of polish this thing off. But if we expand this group, there's several layers in here. And I want to just take note of a couple things. So this top layer, this color grade 3, is actually pushing all the blues to more of that cyan tone to really give it more of that swimming type of feel. But you could definitely turn that off or change that opacity if it's changing your blues a little bit more than you would like. That's happening right there. Now below that, you're going to see something a little unusual. So in color grade 2, we actually have this additional layer clipped to it. And this is kind of a warmth control. So what this is doing is it's removing some of the warm tones out that's being caused by this color grade 2. So if you're dropping your subjects in and they feel just a little bit cool for you, you could come up and you could just turn this warmth control off and it's going to warm them up just a little bit. Or if you have it off and your subject's a little bit warm, you could just turn this on and it's going to cool them down and neutralize those tones just a little bit. But feel free to play with those. Those layers are there and you can change opacities and visibilities and things to suit your own needs. Below that's our facial highlight boost, so those are the layers we're going to use to brighten up some of the highlights on the face. So the bottom one is preset for lighter skin tones, the one above that's for darker skin tones. As always, you can just read the layer descriptions to see what each layer is doing. Below that we just have some text layers down here we can modify. You will see on this, basically I have it preset for the last name. On that text there is some water spot texture being applied to that. Alright, and I do have a note on here. Basically, I like it set to overlay for any kind of like medium text colors. So you can see this kind of like this medium blue and overlay looks really cool on there. But if you were going with, say, like a darker or lighter text, so let's say we just go all the way to black, you can see that that texture disappears. But I have a note in here to use hard light blend mode for those light and dark textures. So if we come down and switch this to hard light, you can see it is going to punch through, so it kind of gives you that idea that it's black, but you're going to get still that gradient from that texture. So it'd be the same thing. We'd leave that if we were going like all the way white on the text or something really bright. It's still going to allow that to show up and see some of that water spot. All right, so just watch for that note there on that layer about changing that blend mode, and that's going to help that texture to show up. But let's reset that. And then just some more text below that. As always, the fonts that are being used here are linked on the product page. All right, below that, a couple clipped layers here. So this is these foreground kind of blur spots here. You can see by default, we have kind of like this blue-orange, color harmony thing going on here in the template by default. And so this is adding some blue and orange kind of water spots blurred out here on the edges. But if you wanted to just make those like a uniform color, like you wanted to make them gold, well, I have this color layer clipped to this. You just turn that on, and then you could literally just double click here. And if you wanted to set it all to like the same shade of blue, you could do that. Or like the same warm tone, you could do that. So very easy to change the colors of those as well. Below that are a couple more clipped options here. So basically this is a folder that is filled with all of these foreground water splashes that's going to sit in front of your subject. If you expand this, you can see there's just a few different groups, and they're separated into groups because each of these, to get the effect that I was going for, are all different blend modes. You can see that one needs to be set to screen, that one to lighten, and that one to normal. So that's why those all exist within that group right there. And same as with the water spots, if you wanted to tint that water color, you could do that by turning this clipped layer on and just picking out, again, whatever tone that you wanted to kind of match that up to. So it can work in the right scenarios, but in general it looks better to leave it as default. But again, if you are trying to add color to all this, then you can also add some color cast to the water down below here. All right, so just by turning this layer on and off, that's going to add some color cast across everything, so you can match all that blue up there, or maybe that tone. You could change it, completely. And then one thing I always like to point out is anytime there's an effect mask, depending on the color that you use and the subject that's in there, you can always adjust this mask. So you can see by default how this kind of like bleeds up into the water right here. I did discover, like, if you're using blues and things like that in your subject it works because it kind of creates this color cast on your subject. So in some instances it looks really cool. But if you wanted to adjust that, it's really simple. You just unclick this layer, or you could actually leave it clicked. You just need to make sure the mask is selected. Command or Control T, and you could actually just pull that down a little bit. So if you find that's bleeding up to where you don't want it, it's a real easy fix, but in some instances it looks good. So that's why it's like that by default. But we'll turn that off for now. Below that are our water highlights. That's what's adding these punchier highlights across the water right here to make that stand out. Below that we have this dark reflection. So that when you drop your subject in, it kind of makes sense that they would have this really dark kind of reflection where you wouldn't see much detail. It just really helps kind of sell the idea that they're in there, and you'll see that when we turn our subject on. Below that, we have this is just a layer clip to the subject group, which is going to do some darkening and some little bit cooler, bluer tones to kind of match the scene here. And as always, marked in red is the subject group, pre-masked. So if you expand this group, you see it's going to tell you subject here. We'll turn our subject on in just a second. If we keep going down, this is just giving some overall darkening to our background, because I think it looks really cool to give it kind of that nighttime feel with those lights blurred out in the background. Below that, these are some background splashes and water spots that are in behind the subject. Once again, you could colorize these by turning this layer on and just, picking or typing in whatever color that you would like. We keep going down. Now's our background light blurs. So those are those blurs that's being added to the background. You could turn those off if you like, or you could just create a singular color cast for all of them. Once again, by coming in here and picking a color. That one looks kind of nasty, so I do recommend leaving this over. Instead of punching this saturation all the way up, you kind of want to leave it over towards the middle right here to blend a little bit better. But if you're turning all of your color layers on, it's all going to look better anyways. All right, so let's leave that off. Down here's our water layer, and clipped to that is just a layer that's given that some darkening and contrast to help it look nice for the scene. And then this is the background glow, so that's what's creating that blue radiant background back here. So you can double click on this to get your gradient. I like to just come over and grab the actual gradient tool, and then you can change the size or shape of this. But you could also, click on layers and put different colors and things like that in very easily as well. Just by double clicking on the colors. So we don't want that to be yellow, but we could reset that back to like a lighter color. So it's very easy from there, or to do it, like I said, directly from the preset up here by double clicking here. And then you can open up that gradient this way as well and change all of those colors. All right, so then below that, that's just the background color. I think it looks best in black, but you could always add a little bit of tonality in there if you wanted to push that around a little bit to get a little bit different tone. You certainly could do that. All right, so there's all the layers. So really it's just as simple for this one as dropping your subject in. I feel like in most instances it's probably going to be left, default for swim or something like that, but it does look pretty cool for like football players and things if you want to put them in the water. And we can take a look at that in a second. I can just drop one in. But for something like a swim subject, it's as simple as just dropping them in. Command or Control T to resize and place them, where you want them to be. And then what I would typically come do is look at my facial highlight boost layers, or for overall for swim, we might even highlight some other skin tones. What I usually like to do is just hold Shift and disable the mask on these, and then kind of see what's giving me what. All right, so we're getting a lot of effect over the subject with that top one, again, for darker skin tones. But I do like some of what's happening with this lower one here. So I'm just going to take a white brush, 100% flow. Let's bring the size down And I'm just going to come up over the subject a little bit in a couple spots here, just to bring up a couple of those highlights. That looks cool. And then for the face, I think I'm going to use that darker one and bring the face highlights out, maybe a little bit down through here. And then you can always change this opacity up and down based on how much you want that to show through. I think that looks pretty good right there. So that's pretty cool. You know, I would just call that one done once the name was updated. Now if we wanted to, we can drag a football player over just to show some changing of the colors here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset these layer masks here. So we'll delete that and re-add these black masks to hide those. So let's come down, let's just turn this subject off. I'm going to come over here, let's grab a football player, drag him in, and we'll just kind of push him around. I think his size looks pretty good. I like that. I'm just going to kind of scooch him around till I like the position. There we go. I like that. So we can collapse that group. You can see right here, this is what this darkening layer is doing. Again, it's just kind of dimming all those highlights, adding a little bit of blue tones to kind of match the water. But let's kind of customize this a little bit. So let's start at the bottom here let's go to our background lights and our glow. All right, so let's start with the glow. You know, in this instance, I think we would want to add a little bit more red tone. So I'm just going to play with, I think that looks good. Maybe that center, we could do a little bit brighter tone by coming out this way. Let's just go to white. Just let that highlight in behind there brighten up. So a very bright pink. I like that. Click OK. And then our background lights, let's turn these on. It actually looks kind of good with just that warm. Sometimes red on red kind of washes out, so leaving it warm against that looks cool. But let's just take a look if we match it up. Yeah, see that goes too red for me. I'm going to pull it out here, but then I'm going to come down and play with these warm tones as far as like these oranges and things, because I think it looks better to leave that little bit of orangish type of contrast against that red. I think it actually looks better. So that looks pretty cool right there. Let's leave that. Our background splashes, let's turn that on, but I think we could add some red into those, but also keep it warm to kind of match those lights in the background. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Let's make it just a little bit more to the red side though, maybe something like that. I'm going to go ahead and copy this number. And then let's come on up here. Our watercolor cast, let's play with that. I'm going to do that last. Let's do our water splashes. So let's turn this one on. I'm going to paste that same value in there. Then I'm going to play with this slider within here. Because again, it's water. I don't want it to be like super colorized. I just want it to have a little bit of tint of what we're trying to do. Maybe push it to a bit more red. That looks pretty cool. And then our blur color, let's paste in that same number. I think I like that orange to match those lights in the back. And then our watercolor. I want to do this one last because something like red, I want to be careful. I don't want this to look like, you know, a pool of blood or something crazy there. Although for a cosplay image, maybe that'd be kind of cool. But I am going to start with kind of like this warm, again, instead of going red, keeping it more on that orangish tone. I mean, it does play well with red, but I think if we go, you know, completely red, I think that's a little bit over the top for me. So I think I want to leave it like that reddish, orangish type of color. I think looks pretty cool. Click OK. And for this one, I actually do want to transform this and just pull that mask down a little bit. All right, there we go. So again, you could always, you know, if you could just leave this look like water, which I think looks really cool too. I might even just bring the opacity of this colorized down. So just really adding just a touch in there. That looks pretty sweet. And then of course your text would just be changing your text color. And then that texture is going to show through there. So no issues there. So you could click around if you wanted like a brighter text or to pick an actual red. This could be a good way to put that just true red right back into it. All right, so easy enough to come in, change these colors, and make some really cool looks that way too. So hopefully that makes sense and that you get a ton of use out of this one. I would love to see how you guys are using it. So please feel free to share, and I'll see you on the next one.